Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Peter Mousaferiadis, and I'm speaking to you from Melbourne, Australia. I'm just going to share my screen. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how diversity mapping can support teachers to deliver culturally responsive education. And I'm representing Cultural Infusion, and today my focus will be on our knowledge-based tool that we've spent the last 5 years developing called Diversity Atlas. Just a few words about Cultural Infusion. Cultural Infusion was established as an idea back in 2002, and our focus has been working in the space of education using technology and culture and delivering a whole range of programs to students across Australia. We've developed also a series of apps as a way of being able to upscale and replicate our programs, which we're now delivering to different parts of the world. And we also have an official partnership with the Australian National Commission for UNESCO. Here's a schematic diagram which underpins in many ways the conceptual thinking behind Cultural Infusion. And one of our objectives is how do we reduce ethnic and race-based discrimination. And here we can see that the drivers of racism are ignorance and fear, and the way we counteract ignorance and fear is through familiarization and collaboration. And this is where education plays a very important part. And in the case of Diversity Atlas, in the context of schools, it's about focusing on how we can acknowledge diversity, send students on a discovery, create that lived experience, not only through our live programs, but that way of being able to discover diversity within a classroom setting, and also a way of being able to create those cultural specific experiences as a way of building familiarization. And also the focus on collaboration through using Diversity Atlas as a starting point for conversations, a repository for cultural diversity, and also as a way of being able to find ways to foster an exchange of ideas between students. And here we refer to that as confluence. Just a few words about diversity. Until recently, diversity has been poorly defined, analytically neglected, and in need of robust understanding. It's even been criticized due to its blurriness. And one of our objectives at Cultural Infusion over the last 5 years has been, how can we start to create measurement around this notion of diversity and begin to understand what we mean by the metrics that underpin diversity. And here is a diagram around variety, balance, and disparity. So in the left, top left over here, where you see there's 2 circles and 2 triangles, let's say, for example, we had 2 Italian and 2 French languages. And on the bottom, we have an Italian, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. Then there's a greater variety of languages in the group on the bottom far left. Balance, what we mean by balance as one of the metrics is the distribution of the units we're trying to measure. So in the case of language, we would have, let's say over here, we would have, 4 Italian, the circles representing Italian, 4 Italian languages. We would have in one area of the organization, then we would have, Portuguese and Spanish. And over here, what we see is we have a more equal distribution of the languages across an organization. This is extremely important. Why? Recently in Australia, the 2018 Human Rights Commission of Australia released a report called Leading the Change, which identified that 97% of all the key leadership positions in Australia of the top 500 companies reflected people from a Northern European background, which was not at all representative of the greater mix of the Australian population. And third is disparity or distance. And here what we mean is the dissimilarity of the units we're trying to measure. So let's say here in one group we had an Italian, French and Spanish person, and in another group we had an Italian, Japanese and Arabic speaking person. Then we could actually say that the diversity, the cultural diversity in the second group is far greater than the first group. And this is extremely important because we know that someone's ethno-linguistic background influences the cognitive processes. So these are the metrics of what we're working towards in measuring diversity. Okay, so Diversity Atlas has come about as a result of a whole lot of subject matter experts representing organizational management, behavioral sciences, anthropology, database, data analytics, and many other disciplines coming together to create this first measurement tool in the world, which is not only able to provide a comprehensive insight into the extent and type of cultural and demographic dimensions of diversity. And one of the focuses is looking at this balance, is looking at the distribution of the diversity across an organization. Okay, so the demographic categories that we look at is age, range, gender, disability, education level, occupation, sexual orientation, and appearance. And the cultural diversity pillars underpinning Diversity Atlas is country of birth going back to 3 generations. We use the United Nations database of countries. We have a database of 7,500 languages. We have a database, let me just go back. We have a database of 650 religions. So, and we look at their sub-branches and subgroups. So let's say you would identify as being, Muslim, then you would select Islam, and you might say you're a Sunni or a Sufi, and then you might want to select a subgroup. And then there's a database of around 8,500 ethnicities sitting at the back end of Diversity Atlas. So once we have sent out a survey, whether it be to students or to organisations, and in this case, students, and there's ways of being able to switch on and switch off some of the questions that we might ask, we're then the tool is able to produce a whole series of key facts within a few, instantly produce these key facts. And there's just an example of some of the key facts that are produced by Diversity Atlas. Okay, so the other function is the compare function, and this is being able to compare, let's say, if you wanted to compare one class to another class, and I'll talk about why this might be important later on for organisations or schools. So another aspect of Diversity Atlas is the DMI framework that we've developed. And here, D&I, most of you are familiar with, is an acronym for diversity and inclusion, but we've also looked at mutuality, and mutuality, an index, we're developing a mutuality index at the moment, and mutuality looks at to what extent is an organisation representative of the community or the services it's delivering, those products to. So let me say that again, excuse me. So to what extent is an organisation representative of the community that it's delivering the services and products to? So in the case of Diversity Atlas in schools, think for a moment how important it would be for governments when they're assigning teachers to different schools to think of the demographics of the area, or recognising that, in the next few years there's been all these children, all these babies that have been born to a specific part of the world from a specific heritage, to see if they could recruit teachers to be able to reflect to some extent the ethnicity, or even maybe perhaps the religions, or country birth of the parents or the grandparents of those children. So this is another way of describing this is, of course, representation. And this, in one way, is drawn upon the theory of, or the principle of thermodynamics, where Rezza.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, you're still here. Okay, so one of the, excuse me there, one of the, Rezza, we're going to have to splice that out there. Okay, just take a note of the time. One of the principles of thermodynamics is the law of recursive which basically states that any organisation or any, if it doesn't reflect or adapt to its environment, it will eventually create tension. So the benefits of having a diversity agile, being diversity agile for education providers, is a workforce that reflects the community and builds a better trust in public institutions. Diversity in background and lived experiences, we know, improves the quality and responsiveness of services for various demographics. And diversity, of course, and public policy leads to the development of better rounded public policy that is relevant to the needs of a diverse community. Okay, so here is a case study which we're able to show you all, and this was a report that we delivered for the Melbourne Youth Orchestra. They comprise of 13 orchestras, and here you can see the mutuality gap, where in some cases it's greater and in other cases it's underrepresented. So for example, if you go to the bottom, the sub-Saharan African area, there was only 0.5% of the participants of Melbourne Youth Orchestra who represented that part of the world. But in other parts, for example, Oceania, there was a much greater representation. So the mutuality gap varied with the students participating in the Melbourne Youth Orchestra's project. In total, about 500 students make up the various orchestras. And here are just some screen grabs of the different pillars. And here that you can see, for example, for country of birth, 18 countries of birth were represented, and Australia and China were the two highest countries. But in comparison with other areas, we noticed that where there's a high representation of people born in India, we didn't have that in the Melbourne Youth Orchestras. What we did find was a high representation of people from mainly East and Southeast Asia. Here's another screen grab for ethnicity. In total, there were more than 45 ethnicities represented in the Melbourne youth orchestras. I will be making this available for each of you to download and look at in further detail. And of course, in disability, this was an area that was hugely underrepresented. And there's probably a whole range of different reasons for this, but there was an underrepresentation of 55.1%. So this was a big underrepresentation. And of course, there could be a range of reasons for this when it comes to music and students participating in music. So this is just a quick summary. The Melbourne Youth student cohort is predominantly female, 62.8%, 97.1% spoke English, 56.5% were multilingual, 81.6% were born in Australia, and a lot of them either identified with European or ancestry at 42%. Asian ancestry was 20.7%, and 38.6% chose that they did not have a religion. 38.2% were Christian, and 91.8% ticked that they didn't have a disability. And here's just some more statistics. And of course, these infographics are produced instantly by Diversity Atlas. Okay, and that brings me to the end of my report. And Diversity Atlas is a tool that we feel could be used by schools as a way of being able to start conversations and identify who the student population is, and go on a discovery journey, not only for students, between students, but also as a way for teachers to be able to develop better culturally responsive education. Thank you very much. And I want to also thank my team that's been working on this. Rezza Moieni, who's our digital projects director, who's got a background in engineering, mathematics, database, administration, big data, and the rest of the team. Martin Plowman, who developed the workforce mutuality standards for Health West and is working with our organisation to roll those over for a whole range of other sectors that we're working with. Nivi Balachandran, who was with us until recently. Maximo, who's based in Spain, and all the other contributors. Thank you very much.